The Silent Guardians. The morning stars of the Andorian sector painted the sky in gentle blues and purples, as Ambassador Theron of the Xelon Confederation stood on the observation deck of their capital station, Harmony Prime. His bark-like skin caught the light beautifully, a testament to his people's plant-based evolution. The Xelon had always been gardeners of peace, cultivating diplomatic relationships across 17 star systems for over 3 centuries. Their cities grew like living forests, their technology bloomed from organic compounds, and their philosophy centered on nurturing life wherever it took root. But today the gentle ambassador watched in horror as his peaceful world burned. The Vexari Empire had come without warning, their black ships cutting through space like obsidian blades. Unlike the Xelon's curved living vessels that resembled flowering branches, the Vexari ships were angular and cruel, designed not for exploration or trade, but for one purpose alone: conquest. General Krex, the Vexari warlord leading the invasion, had broadcast a simple message to every Xelon settlement: submit or burn. You have one cycle to decide. The Xelon had tried diplomacy, offering trade agreements, cultural exchanges, even territorial concessions. But the Vexari answered with plasma bombardments that turned their beautiful garden cities into smoking craters. Within hours, 12 of their 17 worlds had fallen silent. The survivors gathered around Harmony Prime, their graceful ships, forming a protective circle that everyone knew would not hold for long. "Sir," whispered Counselor Vela, her voice trembling like leaves in a storm. "The Vexari fleet has surrounded us. They're demanding complete surrender within the hour." Theron's photosynthetic patches flickered with stress patterns, but his voice remained steady. "Send word to the Galactic Council. Ask for immediate assistance." The response came within minutes. "The Galactic Council regrets that military intervention is not possible at this time. We encourage peaceful resolution through diplomatic channels." Other messages followed. From the Alteran Republic came polite refusals. The Centauri Alliance expressed sympathy, but claimed their forces were committed elsewhere. The Rigel Syndicate simply ignored the calls entirely. One by one, every major power in the galaxy found excuses to avoid confronting the Vexari Empire. As the final hour approached, Theron stood alone in the communications center, watching his people prepare for the end. Children were being evacuated to the innermost sections of the station. Adults who had never held weapons in their lives were learning to operate emergency defense systems. The beautiful harmony that had defined Xelon society for generations was cracking under the weight of approaching doom. Then young communications officer Xylan approached with uncertainty in his golden eyes. "Ambassador, there is one signal we haven't tried. The old emergency beacon that reaches the Sol system. Theron's bark-like features creased in confusion." "Sol? You mean the humans? But they've been silent for decades. Most species consider them extinct or irrelevant." "The beacon is still active, sir. The frequency is clear." Theron looked out at the approaching Vexari ships, their weapons charging for the final assault. What choice did they have? "Send the message. Send it to Earth." Light years away, in the depths of Earth's Cheyenne Mountain complex, Captain Elena Vasquez sat at her monitoring station, reviewing routine deep space communications. The human race had indeed been quiet for the past 40 years, but not for the reasons the galaxy believed. After a series of diplomatic betrayals and trade wars that had cost human colonies dearly, Earth had made a decision. They would turn inward, focus on their own development, and let the galaxy assume they were weak and irrelevant. It was a useful deception. Elena's console suddenly erupted with an urgent signal, the old emergency frequency that hadn't been used in decades. The translation matrix worked quickly, converting the alien language to English, and Elena's eyes widened as she read the desperate message. "This is Ambassador Theron of the Xelon Confederation. Our people face extinction at the hands of the Vexari Empire. 17 worlds burn. Millions are dead. The galaxy has abandoned us. We know humans have been silent, but if any compassion remains in your species, please help us. We have children aboard our stations. We have elders who remember when the stars were young. Please don't let us die alone in the dark." Elena's hand trembled as she reached for the emergency communication panel. Within minutes, the message was racing through secure channels to the highest levels of Earth's government. Within an hour, it had reached Admiral Marcus Chen, commander of Earth's Deep Space Fleet. Admiral Chen was a veteran of the old conflicts, a man who had watched human colonies burn while alien allies stood by and calculated the political cost of assistance. His face was weathered by years of carrying the weight of Earth's isolation, but his eyes still burned with the fire that had made humanity feared in the early days of galactic expansion. He read the Xelon message 3 times, then activated his command communicator. "This is Admiral Chen to all fleet commanders. Authorization code Omega-7. Wake the Titans." Across the solar system, hidden bases that had been silent for decades suddenly blazed with activity. On the dark side of the moon, massive hangar, doors opened to reveal ships that defied easy classification. They were not the sleek, elegant vessels favored by most galactic civilizations. They were brutal, functional instruments of war, built by a species that had learned the hard way that in a hostile universe, strength was the only currency that mattered. The flagship Retribution was a dreadnought-class vessel 2 kilometers long, its hull scarred from battles the galaxy had forgotten but Earth remembered. Around it, dozens of smaller vessels took formation. Heavy cruisers with names like Vengeance and Determination, fast attack craft designated Fury and Wrath, and transport ships filled with soldiers who had trained for 40 years for a war they hoped would never come. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the Retribution, watching as his fleet prepared for immediate departure. His communications officer looked up from her station with a question in her eyes. "Sir, should we send a response to the Xelon message?" Chen considered for a moment. "Send this. Message received. Help is coming. Do not surrender. Signed, Earth Defense Force." The response reached Harmony Prime just as the Vexari ships began their final approach. Ambassador Theron stared at the simple message, hardly daring to believe it. Around him, his people looked to him for guidance, for hope, for some sign that their children might see another sunrise. "All stations," Theron announced over the general communication system. "Earth has responded. Help is coming. All defensive positions, prepare to buy as much time as possible." General Krex, aboard his command vessel Dominator, received the intercepted message and laughed. The sound was like grinding metal, harsh and without humor. "Earth? The silent world? They haven't been seen in galactic politics for decades. Let them come. One more world to conquer." But as the Vexari ships moved into position for their final assault, something strange appeared on their long-range sensors. Ships were coming. Many ships. More ships than any single world should have been able to field. And they were coming fast. On Harmony Prime, the Xelon defenders watched their screens with growing amazement. The approaching fleet was massive, moving in perfect formation through hyperspace. But what shocked them most was not the size of the fleet, but its composition. These were not exploration vessels or even typical military ships. These were weapons of war, pure and simple, designed by a species that understood violence in a way the peaceful Xelon never could. The first human ships dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system, and the galaxy's understanding of Earth changed forever. The Retribution emerged from the swirling portal of folded space like a dark angel of judgment, its weapons already charging, its intentions clear. Behind it came wave after wave of human vessels, each one a testament to 4 decades of preparation for this exact moment. General Krex's laughter died in his throat as he watched the readings. The human fleet wasn't just large, it was sophisticated. Their ships moved with precision that spoke of extensive drilling. Their formations were textbook perfect, and their weapon signatures indicated technology that was not primitive or outdated, but devastatingly advanced. Admiral Chen's voice cut across all frequencies, calm and implacable. "This is Admiral Marcus Chen of the Earth Defense Force. You are attacking peaceful beings under the protection of Terra. You have 10 minutes to withdraw from this system or face the consequences." The Vexari response came quickly. "Human, you are outnumbered 3-1. Withdraw now and we will spare your fleet." Chen's reply was equally quick. "You misunderstand. You're not trapped in here with us. We're trapped in here with you. And we've been waiting 40 years for this conversation." The 10 minutes passed in absolute silence. The Xelon held their breath. The Vexari prepared their weapons, and the humans waited with the patience of predators who knew their prey had nowhere to run. When the deadline expired, Admiral Chen gave the order that would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. All ships, weapons free. Show them why Earth went quiet. When Titans wake, the first salvo from the human fleet lit up the darkness of space like the birth of a new star. The Vexari had expected primitive projectile weapons or basic energy beams, the kind of technology that backward worlds typically wielded. Instead, they faced something that defied their understanding of warfare itself. The Retribution opened fire with weapons that seemed to bend reality around them. Gravitational lances that crushed ships from the inside out. Quantum torpedoes that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, making them impossible to defend against. Energy projectors that didn't just destroy armor, but converted it directly into plasma, turning enemy ships into brief, brilliant supernovas. General Krex watched in stunned silence as his front line simply ceased to exist. 12 heavy cruisers, the pride of the Vexari fleet, were reduced to scattered atoms in the first 30 seconds of combat. His sensors couldn't even properly track the human weapons, registering only the effects as his ships died one by one. "Impossible," he whispered, his scaled hands gripping the command console. No single world has this kind of firepower. But Admiral Chen wasn't interested in explanations. 4 decades of isolation had given Earth time to develop technologies that the galaxy couldn't imagine. While other species had focused on efficiency and elegance, humans had focused on one thing: overwhelming destructive capability. Every weapon system had been designed with a single question in mind: how do we end threats so completely that they never return? The human heavy cruiser determination demonstrated this philosophy as it engaged a cluster of Vexari destroyers. Instead of trying to outmaneuver them, it simply accelerated directly toward their formation. The Vexari ships poured fire into its approaching hull, but the human vessel's shields absorbed the damage without even flickering. When it reached optimal range, the determination unleashed a weapon that the Vexari had never seen before. Dimensional. Charges erupted from the human ship's forward batteries, each one opening a tiny rift in space-time. The rifts lasted only microseconds, but that was enough. They appeared inside the Vexari ships, bypassing shields entirely, and released their energy directly into the enemy vessel's core systems. The destroyers didn't explode so much as they folded in on themselves, their hulls crumpling like paper in the grip of impossible forces. Commander Yara of the Vexari. Third Fleet tried desperately to coordinate a response. "All ships focus fire on their flagship. Bring down that dreadnought." The order was logical, but the humans had anticipated it. As the Vexari ships turned their attention to the Retribution, the smaller human vessels struck like wolves. Fast attack craft with names like Fury and Wrath materialized from stealth fields, their crews having waited patiently for this exact moment. These ships were crewed by volunteers from the old colonial wars, men and women who had watched their homes burn while alien allies debated the political implications of helping. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Kim piloted the Fury through the Vexari formation with the skill of someone who had trained for this her entire adult life. Her ship was small compared to the massive alien vessels around her, but it was fast, heavily armed, and crewed by people who had very personal reasons for being here. "Remember New Singapore?" she whispered as she locked onto a Vexari command ship. The words were a prayer, a promise, and a threat all at once. New Singapore had been a human colony that had died while the Galactic Council debated whether to intervene. No one had debated long enough to actually send help. The Fury launched a spread of hunter-killer missiles, each one guided by an artificial intelligence that had been programmed with 40 years of accumulated tactical knowledge. The missiles, wove through the Vexari point defense systems like dancers, finding weak points in shields and armor that the enemy didn't even know existed. When they struck, they didn't just explode. They learned, adapted, and optimized their detonations for maximum damage. The Vexari command ship's bridge erupted in sparks and flame. Commander Yara found herself thrown against a bulkhead, her command console a twisted wreck of melted metal and shattered crystal. Around her, junior officers screamed reports that made no sense. Hull breach on decks 7 through 15. Engineering is gone. Life support failing, but the humans weren't finished. As the Vexari fleet tried to regroup, Admiral Chen revealed the true scope of Earth's preparation. The transport ships that had been hanging back suddenly opened their massive cargo bays and new ships began to emerge. Not built in Earth's shipyards but manufactured in space by automated facilities that had been working for decades. These were the factory ships, vessels that could construct entire fleets on the move. As the battle raged, they began producing new fighters, new missiles, new weapon systems. The human fleet wasn't just fighting, it was growing, reinforcing itself in real time, while the enemy could only watch their numbers dwindle. On Harmony, Prime, Ambassador Theron watched the battle with emotions his people's language couldn't properly express. The humans fought with a precision and brutality that was both terrifying and beautiful. Every move seemed calculated, every attack perfectly timed. But what struck him most was the restraint they showed. Despite their overwhelming advantage, the humans made no attempt to pursue fleeing civilian vessels. They focused entirely on military targets, allowing refugee ships to escape to safety. "They're not just powerful," whispered Counselor Vela, her voice filled with awe. "They're precise. They know exactly who they're fighting and why." The battle's turning point came when General Krex, desperate to salvage something from the disaster, ordered his ships to target the Xelon station itself. "If we cannot have victory, we will have revenge," he snarled into his communicator. "All ships, fire on the civilian station. Kill them all." It was the worst decision he could have made. "Admiral." Chen's response was immediate and absolute. "Signal the fleet, new priority target. The one who just ordered the murder of civilians. I want him taken alive." The human fleet's formation shifted with mechanical precision. The Retribution and her escorts moved directly toward Krex's flagship, their weapons charging with an energy signature that made nearby space itself seem to hum with anticipation. The Vexari general found himself facing the full attention of Earth's most powerful warship, and suddenly understood what it felt like to be truly afraid. The Retribution didn't just attack Krex's ship. It methodically disabled every system, every weapon, every means of escape. Tractor beams locked onto the Vexari flagship, holding it motionless while boarding shuttles launched from the human dreadnought. These shuttles carried soldiers who had trained for urban combat on worlds where the gravity was 3 times Earth normal, who could operate in vacuum without breathing apparatus, who treated ship-to-ship boarding actions as routine training exercises. The Vexari crew tried to resist, but they were facing opponents who had spent 4 decades preparing for exactly this scenario. The human soldiers moved through their ship like ghosts, appearing suddenly in corridors that should have been secure, bypassing security systems that should have been impenetrable. When they reached the bridge, they found General Krex cowering, behind an overturned console, his scales pale with terror. "You cannot do this," he whispered as human soldiers secured the bridge. "I am a general of the Vexari Empire. There are rules of war, protocols, treaties." The squad leader, a veteran named Captain Torres, looked down at the alien general with eyes that had seen too much. "You just ordered the murder of civilians. That makes you a war criminal, and Earth doesn't negotiate with war criminals." The capture of their supreme commander broke what remained of Vexari resistance. Ship after ship surrendered, their crews desperately broadcasting their willingness to cease hostilities. The few vessels that tried to escape found themselves pursued by human ships that seemed to anticipate their every move, cutting off escape routes with the efficiency of shepherds herding livestock. As the last Vexari ship either surrendered or fled the system, and strange silence fell over the battlefield, the space around Harmony Prime was filled with the debris of what had once been a formidable invasion fleet. Scattered among the wreckage were the pristine shapes of human vessels, their hulls unmarked by enemy fire, their crews already beginning salvage and rescue operations. Admiral Chen opened a communication channel to the Xelon station. Ambassador Theron, this is Admiral Chen of the Earth Defense Force. The immediate threat has been neutralized. We're beginning rescue operations. For any survivors in the debris field, are you in need of medical assistance or emergency supplies? Theron's voice, when it came, was thick with emotions his species rarely experienced. Admiral, we don't know how to thank you. You came when no one else would. You saved us when we had given up hope. Chen's reply was simple and direct. You asked for help, we came, that's what neighbors do. But even as he spoke, Chen knew that this battle was only the beginning. Across the galaxy, intelligence services were analyzing the sensor data from the engagement. Diplomatic corps were frantically updating their assessments of Earth's capabilities. Military strategists were recalculating the balance of power in a galaxy where humanity had just announced its return in the most dramatic way possible. The humans had been silent for 40 years, but they had not been idle. And now the galaxy would have to learn to live with the knowledge that Earth was not the backward, irrelevant world they had dismissed. It was something far more dangerous, a sleeping giant that had just awakened. The new Guardians. The aftermath of the Battle of Harmony Prime sent shockwaves through every major capital in the galaxy. In the crystal spires of the Alteran Republic, emergency sessions convened as military analysts pored over sensor data that defied belief. The elegant councils of the Centauri Alliance found themselves discussing the unthinkable, that humanity, the species they had dismissed as primitive and irrelevant, had just demonstrated military capabilities that surpassed their own by orders of magnitude. But nowhere was the impact more keenly felt than in the homeworld of the Vexari Empire itself. Emperor Vorthak, a massive reptilian being whose scales had darkened with age and cruelty, stood before a holographic display showing the remnants of his third fleet. Of the 300 ships that had departed for the Xelon Confederation, fewer than 50 had returned. The rest were either destroyed or captured, along with thousands of his most experienced officers. Explain to me, Vorthak said, his voice a low rumble that made the crystal walls of his throne room vibrate. How a single world destroyed an entire fleet. Fleet Admiral Zesek, one of the few senior officers to survive the engagement, tried to find words for what he had witnessed. Your Majesty, the humans, they fight differently than any species we've encountered. Their technology is not just advanced, it's purpose-built for war. Every system, every weapon, every tactical doctrine is designed around one concept: overwhelming force applied with surgical precision. The Emperor's eyes narrowed to golden slits. You're telling me that these humans, who have been silent for decades, who the galaxy considers a minor backwater world, have been preparing for war this entire time? Not preparing for war, Your Majesty. Preparing for this war. Every engagement pattern they used, every weapon system they deployed, it was all designed specifically to counter our tactics. They knew exactly how we would fight, and they were ready for us. The implications were staggering. While the Vexari Empire had been expanding through conquest and intimidation, while the major galactic powers had been focused on trade and politics, humanity had been quietly studying every species, every fleet, every military doctrine in known space. They hadn't just been preparing for war, they had been preparing for war against everyone. Meanwhile, in the Xelon system, a different kind of revolution was taking place. The human fleet had not simply departed after their victory. Instead, they had established a permanent presence, their ships taking up positions throughout the system in a defensive formation that would have made the most paranoid military strategist proud. Ambassador Theron found himself in the unprecedented position of hosting representatives from a species that had just saved his people from extinction. The meeting took place aboard the Retribution, in a conference room that was simultaneously intimidating and oddly comforting. The walls were lined with displays showing Earth's history, images of forests and oceans, cities and art that spoke of a civilization that valued both beauty and strength. Admiral Chen sat across from the Xelon delegation, his weathered face serious. but not unkind. Ambassador, I want to be clear about our intentions. We're not here to conquer or control. We're here because you asked for help, and because we believe that civilized beings have a right to exist without fear of extinction. Theron's photosynthetic patches glowed with relief and gratitude. Admiral, your people have given us our lives. Our children will grow up free because of your intervention. We are prepared to offer whatever compensation you require. Chen shook his head. We don't want compensation. We want something more valuable. An end to the kind of predatory behavior that made this intervention necessary. The Vexari Empire has been allowed to operate with impunity for too long. The galaxy's major powers have been content to let smaller species suffer as long as their own interests weren't threatened. That ends now. The statement hung in the air like a challenge. Theron understood the implications immediately. You're talking about fundamentally changing the balance of power in the galaxy. I'm talking about establishing a new principle, Chen replied. That peaceful species have the right to exist without fear. That when someone calls for help, someone will answer. That strength should be used to protect the weak, not to prey upon them. As word of these conversations spread, the galaxy's reaction was swift and predictable. The Alteran Republic was the first to respond, their diplomatic corps reaching out to Earth through carefully neutral channels. The message was polite but clear. The Republic respected Earth's right to defend itself and its allies, but they hoped that humanity would consider the broader implications of their actions. The response came from Earth's newly established Department of Galactic Affairs, headed by Secretary Linda Morrison, a former colony administrator who had survived 3 separate alien invasions before Earth's withdrawal from galactic politics. Her reply was equally polite and infinitely more direct. The broader implications are exactly what we're considering. The galaxy has allowed predatory empires to operate unchecked for too long. Earth is prepared to serve as a guarantee of security for any peaceful species that requests our protection. The offer was unprecedented. For the first time in galactic history, a major military power was offering protection, not in exchange for tribute or political alignment, but simply because it was the right thing to do. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within weeks, delegations from dozens of species arrived in the Sol system, all seeking the same thing: protection from the various predatory empires that had made their lives miserable for generations. The Kythera, whose crystalline cities had been repeatedly raided by the hegemony of sorrow. The Benthos, whose ocean worlds had been strip-mined by corporate cartels. The Whisper Folk, whose telepathic communications had been exploited by intelligence services across the galaxy. Each delegation was met with the same response. Earth would provide protection, but there would be conditions. Protected species would be expected to govern themselves peacefully, to respect the rights of their neighbors, and to contribute to the common defense when called upon. In exchange, they would receive something that many of them had never experienced: the guarantee that they could live their lives without fear of external conquest. The new arrangement was formalized in what became known as the Terran Protection Accords, signed in a ceremony aboard the Retribution, as it orbited the rebuilt Xelon capital. The symbolism was deliberate. The same ship that had delivered destruction to the Vexari Empire now served as the foundation for a new kind of galactic order. But not everyone was pleased with these developments. The Vexari Empire, still reeling from their defeat, began reaching out to other aggressive species, trying to build a coalition against what they saw as human expansion. The hegemony of sorrow, the Void Hunters, and the Crimson Syndicate all received overtures from Emperor Vorthak, proposing a joint response to the human threat. The proposal was simple. Humanity was clearly dangerous, but they were also isolated. If the predatory empires could coordinate their efforts, they could overwhelm Earth's defenses before the humans could respond. It was a reasonable plan based on sound strategic thinking and historical precedent. It was also the worst mistake they could have made. The coalition's first target was the Benthos system, chosen because it was far from Earth and lightly defended. The assembled fleet was massive. 2,000 ships from 5 different empires, representing the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. They approached the Benthos worlds with confidence, expecting to crush the small human. garrison, and deliver a message that Earth's protection was worthless. They found Admiral Chen waiting for them. The human response to the coalition's formation had been swift and decisive. Intelligence services that had been monitoring galactic communications for 40 years had detected the alliance's formation almost before the participants themselves were aware of it. Response fleets had been dispatched to every threatened system, and additional forces had been moved into position to support them. The Battle of Benthos lasted exactly 17 minutes. The coalition fleet, for all its size and power, was composed of ships designed for raiding and intimidation, not for facing a prepared opponent with superior technology and training. The human defenders didn't just defeat the attackers, they humiliated them, using advanced tactics and weapons to systematically dismantle the largest military force in galactic history. When the survivors limped home, they carried with them a message from Admiral Chen that was broadcast on every frequency in known space. Earth's protection is not a hollow promise. We have the will, the capability, and the determination to defend our allies against any threat. Test us again at your own peril. The message was received, understood, and believed. The coalition dissolved almost immediately, its members suddenly finding urgent business elsewhere in the galaxy. The Vexari Empire itself began exploring diplomatic solutions to their conflicts, while the hegemony of Sorrow quietly began releasing political prisoners and moderating their policies toward subject species. A year after the first distress call from the Xelon Confederation, the galaxy had fundamentally changed. Trade routes that had been unsafe for generations were now secure. Species that had lived in fear now planned for the future. And throughout known space, a new phrase had entered common usage: Earth Watches. Admiral Chen stood once again on the bridge of the Retribution, now flagship of the Terran Protection Fleet. The ship orbited a world called Haven, established as a refuge for species displaced by the old system of predatory empires. Below, former refugees were building new lives, their children playing in streets that had never known the sound of orbital bombardment. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving another distress signal. The Zephyr Collective is reporting aggressive actions by unknown raiders in the Outer Rim." Chen nodded, unsurprised. There would always be someone who thought they could prey on the weak, someone who needed to be reminded of the new rules. "Signal the Third Fleet, set course for the Outer Rim, and send a message to the raiders: surrender now or face the consequences." As the human fleet prepared to depart for yet another intervention, Chen reflected on how much had changed since that first desperate message from Ambassador Theron. Earth had not sought to become the galaxy's protector, but the role had been thrust upon them by the moral cowardice of those who should have acted first. They had accepted the responsibility because someone had to. Because in a galaxy full of predators, someone needed to speak for the prey. Because when the innocent called for help, someone needed to answer. They had called Earth for rescue, and what had arrived was indeed a fleet of destruction. But it was destruction with a purpose, violence with a moral foundation, strength wielded, not for conquest but for protection. The galaxy had learned to fear the name of Earth, but more importantly, it had learned to trust it. And for the first time in generations, the weak could sleep peacefully, knowing that someone was watching over them in the darkness between the stars. The humans had returned to the galactic stage, not as conquerors, but as guardians, and the galaxy would never be the same.